Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello, everyone. Today we have a very interesting guest. I actually feel it's going to be a really interesting show this time. He has a decade of experience in IT leadership, solution architecture, and cloud financial management. He is certified in FinOps, AWS, and Oracle Cloud. He is Director of FinOps at Discover Financial Services. I'm happy to welcome Jason DiDomenico. Jason, how are you today?
Hey, welcome. Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Great. So, Jason, what should be the FinOps practitioner's top priority?
One of the things as a FinOps practitioner that they should focus on, like in general, is the idea of being frugal, right? And really constraining things to having cost, and cost is both fiscal and environmental, right? So when they're approaching cloud and they're approaching things, they should always be in the back of their mind saying, is this the best I can do? And is it going to maximize my business value?
So, Jason, let's double click on maximizing business value. So, we hear it in the FinOps industry all the time. What does it mean to maximize business value?
If you think about it, at the crux of it is, how can I do my business? It's all about revenue. It's all about trying to maximize the bottom line, right? And or the service you're providing, right? Good customer service. How do I maximize that? Is it how do I give the user a good experience on my in my product, in my website, in whatever it is? And that comes at a cost. And so when you're trying to maximize the value that the customer is getting, you have to balance that. It's a series of trade-offs. And so when you're having to make those decisions, you have to really think, okay, is it going to benefit my end customer? Is it going to benefit the product, or what my mission is? And then work backwards to say, how do I maintain that while providing the service and making a profit, right? If you're a for-profit or whatever, or even if you're not a for-profit, how am I using my donations most effectively, right? People are going to expect you to be able to use their money most effectively to benefit the people that they donated it for.
Great. So, if we take one pillar of FinOps, cloud cost optimization, let's leave aside other aspects of cost allocation and budgeting, etc. So, what does it mean to drive business value versus saving money?
Yeah. So one thing we have to define is that optimization doesn't mean cost savings. We have to normalize that behavior as a FinOps professional. It's one of the things we have to make clear, that when you go and cost saves, that's not optimization. Now, because at some point you can't cut any cost, because if you cut the cost, you're going to end up delivering less business value. And so that's why it's always about maximizing the value for the business and for our end customers. And so when you're trying to optimize, there may be a say, hey, we got to invest over here. We have to add more over here. We can take out over here. And that's generally seen as cost savings right now, because we're so grossly over provisioned as industry wide, right? As an industry, I think Flexera's cloud report for 2024 benchmarked us at something industry wide, like 27% waste right now, right, across the industry. And so when you think about that, for optimization, yeah, it's about saving money, right? But one of the interesting aspects of it is waste. Waste has to be seen and categorized, and we have to normalize that, and normalizing it by saying there's a bucket over here that's unacceptable, And there's a bucket over here that's acceptable. And acceptable waste falls in many categories. There's regulations, there's disaster recovery, there are SLAs, SLOs, just architectural standards that a company may have, right? Best practices. And they sometimes come at a cost. And so that's acceptable. But then you have a portion that's unacceptable. It's just we need to go after that portion. Um, and that's kind of one of the things when you optimize, you have to categorize it first and then go after the unacceptable. But then you can't just say, well, it's acceptable. I can't do anything about it. No, you have to then pull in that Werner Vogel's mentioned back at a reInvent what in 2023 that the concept of a frugal architect. And one of the things is like we have to add cost as a constraint. And when you think of it that way, then I can realign and say, okay, this was acceptable waste, but can I do better? Do I need to have it this way? Or is there other technology choices? Is there's other approaches that delivers the same value, that meets the same regulations, whatever our standards are, but delivers it at a better cost, which then increases the value for our end customers.
That's fascinating. And I'd be really happy to deep dive into this categorization approach. And I'm curious, as a FinOps practitioner, how do you know how to categorize a specific waste? Do you have a certain process in place where you engage with engineers or specific technologies you use? How you go about it?
When you really focus on categorizing it, there are things that you have to then take and say, okay, automation identified, right? Or this report, my observability of some way. You have to observe your system first. Then you say, okay, I've identified. Now, cloud service providers provide tooling. There's a lot of other third-party vendors that provide tooling that says, hey, we can optimize this. You can do this based off your usage criteria and metrics of whatever historical. Sometimes it's 7 days, 14 days, 30, whatever you'd like. You can do the same work with a different type of, if it's compute, a different type of underlying hardware that provides the same, again, same value, the same output for a cheaper cost. And so that is one step in identifying the waste. Now you say, if come back and say, okay, there's 30% waste in our compute. Now you have to again and take that and follow a life cycle, right? And there's many life cycles. FinOps has the life cycle, and that's really like you got to really inform yourself and say, okay, take that, take it back to the architecture, your design, and say, why did I design it this way? Was there regulations? Was there constraints? Was there non-functional or functional requirements that required this? And then say, if that is yes, then that becomes acceptable because I had a constraint. That doesn't mean we can't challenge the constraint, but that's kind of the first step in kind of categorizing it. And then you drop it into different buckets and then you deep dive from there.
Very interesting. And I'm curious, I would guess that the architect incentive is to tell you that everything is needed and everything is there for a good reason and nothing has to be changed. Is that a concern to you? And is there a way that for you to challenge an architect?
Yeah, that is a concern. And as a practitioner, I see it day in, day out. All the talks that I've had with folks across the industry all see similar pushback and say, however, when I approach it, I try to be data driven. So I look at the underlying metrics and I look back and say, okay, let's say you're 10% utilized. You're requesting, say, 80%. Your request rate's at 80%. You provisioned, say, 100 cores, right, for this application, 100 cores. You've requested 80. So we over provision a little bit to make sure that you can scale out if you need to before we got to scale the underlying infrastructure. But then you're only using 10%. And people will come back. And when you have these conversations, their first gut reaction is, well, that's because we have to scale and we have to meet our SLAs, and we can't provision fast enough. Yeah, the cloud provisions fast, but we need millisecond response, whatever their story is. And then you say, okay, so what's your throughput you're looking for? Okay, you need, say, 100 transactions per second, right? Well, let's go back at your metrics. Are you observing this? And the question may be, yes, we are, and here's the metrics. Or the question may be, no, we're not. And so if it's no, you're not, then it's like, well, how do you know that you need this? You really don't, because that's unobserved. And so then you go observe it, and then you go find out what your usage is. But let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, that it's all based off of our utilization of our compute. And so I have 80 cores provisioned or requested, 100 cores provisioned, 10% utilized. And then you go back and say, okay, over the last month, what were my peaks? The argument generally is I need to scale for burst, because burst, I can't scale fast enough. And it says, okay, well, where are your peaks? Over the last month, you've peaked at 20%. The last 3 months, you've peaked at 20%. Maybe the last half a year, you peaked at 25%. Last year, you've peaked at 25%. Then you lose that argument of saying, I have to prepare for burst, because your burst has never gotten there. And so then it's like, okay, can we scale in? And then once you scale in, you have to then, how do you scale out, and how fast can I scale out? And that's kind of really goes back to SLA, SLOs, and if you have, and defining them, and then building according to those needs. Uh, Sometimes, unfortunately, you have to re-architect, and that takes a little more effort. And sometimes people like take the easy way out and just throw more resources at things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like you have a very sophisticated way to engage with engineers and deep dive with them into everything. I wonder if you can share with the audience, with the listeners, what do you think is the FinOps practitioners' biggest mistake they do when they engage with engineers?
I would have to say the biggest mistake I see over and over again, or have experienced myself, is definitely early on in my career. I used to engage and say, hey, there's this opportunity. Let's go after this. Like, here it is. And the engineers and stuff would push back and say, no, that's intended. We know this and it's not a problem. Right. And they get defensive. And so when you approach them, and you approach them with, hey, why is this way? It puts people on defensive. And so the biggest mistake you can do is to do that. And when we have to go and have these difficult conversations, it's best to approach it in a question of, and say, hey, there's an opportunity over here. Did you know that these were your metrics? Let's review the metrics together, right? Is one way of approaching it. And then as you're going through it, you can ask questions. And when you're putting the metrics up there and you're looking at a dashboard that says you're 10% utilized, right? And you can see across the room, it gives them the opportunity to say, oh yeah, that's a problem, rather than, it almost feels like they may take it, if you're pointing out this is 10%, why is it 10%, that you're calling them out for not doing their job. And so this gives them that opportunity to kind of be the one that says, yeah, this isn't right. And they may look before the meeting at the metrics, and then come to the meeting like, hey, we know that this is a problem, blah, 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 blah. Right. But that's probably the biggest mistake I think practitioners make, is probably being too aggressive, and not being understanding enough.
That's a great tip. And Jason, you have a technical background as a software engineer in IT architecture, do you feel that your technical background allows you to be a better FinOps leader?
Absolutely. Time and time again, I find myself in conversations that are very technical, and I'm able to give guidance. I'm able to ask the right questions, and I know the terminology. I know what good looks like. And so I can not do it for them, but ask them questions that lead them down the right path. And so without that, I would just be someone to say, hey, here's what the financials look like. Here's what it's costing. Can you explain it? And then they explain it. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. And then you walk out of the room and nothing changes. But understanding the architecture, able to do it myself if I had to, gives me an edge on conversations and um, being able to say, hey, yeah, I don't think that this is the right approach, or why did you decide this way versus that way? I'm able to actually engage at the very technical level.
And beside challenging their decisions, do you feel it also allows you to better understand their side of the story, understand their perspective, and then speak in the right language that will get them interested, engaged, and motivated?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Being able to uh, understand their perspective, being empathetic, right, is always key to anything. And when you're able to understand their approach and the technical reason why they made the decisions they made, it allows you to work backwards to figure out how we can do better. Maybe they've already considered the approach that, say, myself or somebody in my shoes would have, and they have reasons documented on why that's not possible. Maybe they POC'd it. Maybe they went down that pathway, right? And that's very valid. And so understanding the history sometimes is important, and the reasons why they made the decisions they made. Um, I will add though, we should always strive to do better. And so, I always look at, wow, I assume I'm right. I go find and I try to disprove my beliefs. So,
That's very interesting and very inspiring, challenging yourself as well. And Jason, we started talking about actually your background, actually moving from, software engineering, IT, cloud solution architecture, and then becoming a FinOps leader. Why did you make this move? What pushed you towards FinOps?
probably very early on, even when I got out of college, I worked in space power and cooling of data centers, working on efficiency, trying to reduce our energy consumption of our data center. It was in the time where we were doing hot owl, cold owl containment and being more efficient with how we cooled the servers. And that I carried that forward to looking at, well, when I moved into backup recovery and into cloud, carrying that efficiency perspective of saying, how do I do better, right? How can I do this in a different way that saves and constrains it down, but delivers the same results? It just very early on, I was always doing that. But I contribute that maybe a little bit to my physics background, where being that analytical person and logical person, trying to do that type of work.
And I have to tell you, I can only relate because I'm also really passionate about efficiency. And I'm not only trying to make cloud infrastructure more efficient, but also optimize a lot of aspects in my life because it's a passion and something I really feel it's important. And let's be honest, very often it's less sexy than driving more business, for example, or gaining more revenues. But in the end of the day, that's what allows you to get more revenues because it allows you to invest more resources in getting more revenues. So I just wanna say that I can only relate to everything you're saying. And Jason, I wanna come back to the first sentence that you said on this episode. You said that FinOps is about managing costs, but not only the money you spend, but also the environmental costs. So can you share with me a bit more on how you do that today?
Yeah. So everything we do causes some sort of environmental impact, right? Everything. Um, whether they're running in a data center somewhere. It's not our data center, right? It's somebody else's. That's what the cloud is. It's just another person's data center. And the underlying infrastructure takes power, it takes cooling, it uses electricity, right? It has water. If you're water cooled, it has carbon emissions, right? It's all related. And so when I look at it, it's those metrics are just yet another data point to be data driven. And I think I also mentioned sometime on this podcast that it's a series of trade offs. And we have to challenge ourselves sometimes to um, be constrained and to say, while I could pull this lever, buy a commitment discount of some sort and reduce my costs, or it may take me a little bit longer, but I can um, reduce my consumption first and then buy it. Now, we all talk about in FinOps that that's the right approach. How often do you think that's actually taken? It's probably more often than not taken. And it's like, well, we got to save money right now, so I'll pull this lever and then I'll worry about it later. And then you never come back to it. And you're just using stuff you don't need because you're trying to meet a commitment you should have never made. And so that's where environmental side of it can be that other deciding factor of if it's just about the money, there's no other decision. Well, it's about the money. And then it's just, well, should I? Then it becomes, well, this is another data point. It brings it in and it gives context to what you're trying to make a decision on. So that's how I generally perceive it and use it in my day to day, even in my life, when I'm making decisions and whether or not I'm um, going to either drive or take an airplane or take a train. I'm always looking at those things. And sometimes it's like, well, I could take a train. It'll take me a little longer, but I can also get a whole bunch of other work done while I'm on the train because I'm not driving and I'm not flying and going in airports. And I could be more productive. So again, it's even me optimizing efficiency in my own day to day. So it's all part of it.
And Jason, when you prioritize different aspects of FinOps and you have to balance or decide on priority between cleaning up waste or eliminating waste and buying commitments, so you would prefer to start with cleaning the waste and then buying a commitment?
Absolutely. But I will go further is the waste cleanup should be automated, right? If we can automate a lot of the waste cleanup, it allows us to just be more efficient. But yes, you have to go after the waste. Now, be it, you should be able to benchmark very quickly and say, I have 30% waste to get rid of. So let me go buy a commitment for, say, 60% or whatever value. You may go do that because you know you're not going to go down past it. Maybe you might surprise yourself. You don't have to wait to do the whole thing. And I would encourage you not to wait the whole time, right? Because we have to be pragmatic, right? Don't boil the ocean. It's why would I want to go spend a whole bunch of money up front because I'm waiting to go purchase something to save money because I have a bunch of work. But I can purchase stuff up front, do that, and then time it, and so on and so forth.
No, that's very clear. And you start talking about the automation of waste cleanup, and I'm really curious about this topic because I'm hearing from a lot of companies that they're very concerned about automating a waste cleanup, especially in production environments. Is your approach that it's worth the risk and we should definitely clean up the waste? And is there type of waste that you would not automate because of risk concerns?
I hate to say this answer, but it always depends. However, I will answer the directly that yes, I prefer to automate in production. And why? That is just raising the bar on your deployment pipelines, on your software development life cycles, your capacity to do CI/CD correctly. And the reason why people see it as a risk and don't want to automate it is because they have issues in their pipeline, in their CI/CD process, in their life cycles, right? That's where the risk really lies. And so, how well are you doing infrastructure as code? How well are you doing performance testing and benchmarking? How well are you doing those things? If you're doing those things really well, why do you have any worry? If you've built your system to be cost aware, then you should have no worries because it should just scale out to meet your needs, right? It should either scale up or scale out, in and out, up and down. It should just scale vertically, horizontally. We shouldn't have to worry. If you have architectural problems, that's why you then say, wait a second, there's too much risk here. So it's a different reason, but it comes to the same conclusion that I can't automate production. But removing the waste is not the reason. Removing the waste is a symptom of the problem, right?
Absolutely, and that makes perfect sense. And great, Jason. I think you shared with us tons of insights around FinOps, which was amazing and to me very fascinating. I'd like to talk more about you, about Jason, if that's possible.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So first of all, you live today in Chicago, correct?
Absolutely. I live north of the city, in Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I guess it's pretty cold there, and you're with short sleeves. So
I got the heat on it. It's warmed up a little bit. We just got finished with our latest snow coming through, so we're thawing, as I would say.
Okay, I'm to me the New Jersey cold is cold enough. And you're originally from Pittsburgh.
That's correct. Yeah, born and raised just north of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you had a bachelor degree in physics from Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
That's correct. Yep.
So what brought you to learn physics?
I always loved physics. It was something that, when I was in high school, I always wanted to take the AP physics exam, but we didn't have AP physics in our school. And so it was just something I always was passionate about, loved the challenge. I also loved chemistry, mathematics. But I'm also very logical, which is why, I guess I enjoy physics. If somebody can say they enjoy physics, I would be one of them. But then, then I ended up going elsewhere, going into computer science as well. So,
Because you looked for something more practical?
no, it was more, hate to say it, more of I was supposed to graduate in the Great Recession. So back in 2008 was when I was supposed to graduate. And I ended up saying, it might not be the best time to be going out trying to find a job in the market. So I said, I need to find something I can actually pay bills with. Because I wanted to go back for my graduate degree. I wanted to be an astrophysicist. Was originally what I wanted to do. But funding for grants for physics at that time was kind of difficult, and so I couldn't find funding for grad school, and so I decided to say, well, I got to go get a job. So I ended up doing a major in computer science in I think it was like a year and a half, 2 years. I ended up doing a degree of computer science, and then started my computer degree, my career, and here I am. So,
And I can only relate. I can tell you that my dream was always to study physics and philosophy. But I realized that I'm not sure I can, get enough money with physics and philosophy. So I ended up going to study law and accounting, but also then very quickly I realized it's not for me, and I started a path of entrepreneurship and built my first startup, and the rest is history. So I can only relate. And Jason, if I take you now to your last day of your computer science degree, the day you graduated, what advice would you give Jason of back then?
I would probably say focus on outcomes over the task. Too much, I know, even when I was back in a student and when I first started out. And let me say this: this is just industry wide, right? In education, we talk about tasks, talk about you got to do X, Y, and Z. You got tests, you got homework, and you're always task oriented rather than focused on, well, what's the outcome? What are you supposed to get out of it? Why are you doing these tasks? And so that would be my advice to my old self would be remain focused on outcomes over just the task, and long term over short term gains, staying focused. Now, short term gains are important, but they should be in pursuit of a long term, of something longer term. It shouldn't be something that you only do just because you need to do it and you can do it in the short term. It should be in support of a longer term goal.
So always keep an eye on the long-term goal.
Yes.
That's a good one for sure. And Jason, what do you do outside of work? Anything you do for fun?
Yeah, I love spending time with my two daughters. I have a 8-year-old and about a 5, almost 6-year-old. So I spend a lot of time with my daughters. We just recently took a trip to Hershey Chocolate World for Valentine's Day. So I said, I told my kids, what a better way to spend Valentine's Day with your dad than going to a chocolate factory. So that was a lot of fun. And then I spend, when I don't have my daughters, I spend a lot of my time playing D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. So I have a group that I've been playing with now for about a little over a year. But I've been playing now for a better part of 2 decades or more now. So
That's really, really cool. Good for you. And I also love playing with my two daughters. The only problem is that I also have two boys, so I have to spend time with them as well. I'm joking. I love them all, and yeah, spending time with the family is really awesome. And actually, I should also try D&D at some point.
yeah, it's fun. It allows you to think differently. You think you always wished you could.
Exactly, exactly. So great, Jason. I think that's been fascinating. And if our listeners would like to reach out to you, what is the best way? LinkedIn?
Yeah, please reach out on LinkedIn. Happy to connect, happy to have discussions. Looking forward to talking with anybody.
For sure. And I have a lot more questions I'd be happy to ask you if we had more time. So I'm sure the audience have questions as well. So feel free to reach out to Jason via LinkedIn. Jason, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I really appreciated being here, talking with you, and didn't talk about my personal opinion about FinOps. So
It was all my and the audience pleasure. Dear listeners, thank you for joining us again. If you learned something, you had fun, you had a laugh, I'm sure you did, please tell someone about this podcast. Jason, thank you again. This has been another exciting episode of FinOps in Action. See you next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with tip detection and remediation tools that drive action.